My name is Monica Rothgery. I'll tell you more about myself in part two of this time together. But thank you. Thanks for having me. I don't take it lightly. It's a real honor. It's a real privilege to join you at the Center for Spiritual Living here in Tampa. And that's what I'd like to talk about today, the idea of spiritual living. What does that really mean? What does it mean to live spiritually or spiritual living? And I think the good news is that spiritual living is a lot of whatever you want it to be. That's the reason Lane said, no matter where you are on your journey, you're welcome here. Whether you're Jewish or Christian or Islam or Hindu or agnostic or just independent, it doesn't matter. Wherever you are, you're welcome here because there's as many of us that there is, that's how many paths there are. That's how many paths there are to spirit. And the good thing about Centers for Spiritual Living is there's no moral code. There's not a list of rules or 10 commandments. It's really not about doing or not doing. It's about being. Spiritual living is a way of being, and it's a way of standing in your truth of who you are. And I think you said it in the song, and you said it in the reading. We are divine emanations, right? Literally, if everything is God, then we can't be anything but. We are literally a chip off the old block of spirit. And then we just descend into this body. And so, that's what I think spiritual living is. It's staying grounded in who you are. And it's kind of a funny human experience. I like to think of it this way. I don't know if it's really this way, but I imagine my soul was up there with the other souls that I hung out with and sitting around, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it again. And I'm gonna be gay, and I'm gonna choose this, and this. And they were like, don't do it. Don't. You just got back. It's messed up down there. Don't do it. You're crazy. No, I'm gonna go for it because this is great, and hanging out with you guys is really fun, and it's bliss, it's love. But I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go, and then you just dive into this body, and you forget everything you knew. Right, and you forget your divine essence. You forget all the wisdom you brought to it, and then you start on the adventure of your life, of remembering and rediscovering and reconnecting. When I was in college, I almost failed organic chemistry because I became addicted to the video game The Legend of Zelda, which is a Nintendo game. I mean, I spent probably 8 to 10 hours a day playing for days and weeks on end. Now, The Legend of Zelda is one of those games, multi-layered games, where your little guy goes through and solves different puzzles. And along the way, you get new tools and new powers, a bigger saber or the ability to be invisible or create a force field around yourself. But then every time you go through a kingdom, and you meet dragons and little mischievous dwarfs that kind of present challenges and barriers, and you defeat those, and then you get rewarded with a little bit of knowledge, a clue, and a little bit more power and strength, and then you move on to the next kingdom. And so I played for many months, and then one day I got the last clue, and I solved The Legend of Zelda. And I passed organic chemistry, don't worry. But is that not exactly what life is like? We agree to play this game, and we set up our character's avatar, and then we drop into the planet and spend a lifetime running around from kingdom to kingdom, discovering who we are. And then along the way, we get stronger, and we get wisdom from our experience, and we get more power. But the reality is life's challenges, real life, is not, gargoyles and dragons and little dwarfs. There are real experiences in our human experience, like disease or loss or disappointment. And those challenges, unlike The Legend of Zelda, make life sometimes not seem to be fun. But what if it could be? What if it could be fun? What if we embrace the idea that life could be like a video game? And so here you are at the Centers for Spiritual Living to discover something, perhaps, to get an idea on how to play the game or how to do spiritual living or how to be a spiritually living being. And you're at the right place. Because in every video game, there's a home base where your character can go to get, when your energy levels are starting to drop in the game and you're about to game over, you can go to that home base, the center, and get rejuvenated and re-energized. And that's what the center is. The center is a home base for you to get that energy, that boost. And we'll talk about that a little bit more during my part 2. But let's get back to how this idea of playing the game of spiritual living, and what to do when, what do you do when life's challenges present a barrier, a perceived barrier? How do you stay grounded in the truth and the knowing? And the word I would offer you is practice. Spiritual practice. Last week, I went up to Cleveland for a funeral. My younger cousin had made her transition, Renee. Renee was just, her body was just tormented by the disease of lupus for many decades. And lupus eats at your joints and your organs. And despite all of that, Renee never lost this spark, this twinkle in her eye, this kind of almost joy-filled essence, a laugh that was from her chair. She would have this infectious laugh. And so I went up to her funeral, and the funeral should have been and could have been a real celebration. It could have been a celebration of Renee and how she showed us how that pain doesn't necessarily have to equal suffering. She was a role model for us. And her funeral could have been a celebration in the fact that she is free of this dense earthly body, no longer suffering in that pain, and or experiencing that pain. And who knows, on to the next greatest kingdom, the next greatest adventure. She had transitioned into some. So the funeral could have been that, but friends, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was sad, and not human grief sad. It was sad in a different way because the folks there had held on to decades of attachment to wrongings, things that have happened to them over the years, separation, divorce, who cheated on who, and it was all brought to this event. It was just witnessing it was challenging me. Because, it's not fair. God's cheating me. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. And I'm standing in my truth, but I'm getting a little bit shaky because, I know Renee's in bliss and her body's free and she showed us the way, but at the same time, I'm witnessing all of this heavy, real human condition. And then I get a wave of my own grief. And I start to feel the grief of the loss of my cousin and my mom and my grandma. And I'm like, what am I going to, I'm seriously losing it here. And I don't want to not stay grounded. And I look up and I catch the eye of Aunt Kate. Now, Aunt Kate is one of those souls, you just know that their energy dances with angels. Like, she's a wise soul. And she's far along on the game, right? She catches my eye, and we just exchange a knowing look. And so I walked over to Aunt Kate, and she gave me a hug, and it was one of the few hugs I got during COVID, right? But while she hugged me, she just whispered in my ear. She said, "The secret is to hold both." I instantly felt peace. And I knew exactly what she meant. The secret is to hold both, to hold the joy and the experience, and the understanding and the realization that Renee has transcended and is on to greater things, and to hold the human experience. The secret was to hold both. And I was able to grieve, but I was able to just stay embodied in what I knew to be true. Now, how did Aunt Kate know how to hold both? Practice. Spiritual practice. She has a spiritual practice being the work we do every day. So on game day, we're ready. When life shows up with dragons and dwarfs to challenge what we think we know and what we believe to be true, we can face them. For the last 3 weeks, I loved watching the Olympics. Those athletes that show up and represent their countries, they're amazing. But they don't just show up at the Olympics and do some of these amazing things see, there we go. Right? They have spent years and years and years practicing so that on game day they're ready to go. Mystics are the Olympians of spirituality. Mystics are people like you and me, human beings, but who have devoted their lives to being one with spirit, to being connected to spirit, so connected that they lose their oneness. They have remembered who they are, and then they stay in that alignment throughout their lives. And mystics are found in every tradition throughout the ages. You know, there's Sufis, there's Jewish mystics, there's tons of Catholic saint mystics, right? So this is not a new thing, right? Mystics have been around forever, but they're these people who have committed their life to remembering and connecting with spirit, and then basically lose themselves. They still are human, right? But they're just dialed in, and then they have a daily practice, right? They probably meditate for hours, and they oftentimes live in an environment, whether it's a cloister or a monastery, a place where they can just stay focused on spirit. Now, I don't know about you, but today I can't dedicate hours and hours to meditation. My spiritual practice can't take as much time as I used to play in Legends of Zelda. No, we can't isolate ourselves or hide in a cave or be a hermit or join a monastery. Most of us can't. Our spiritual practice has to fit into the life we lead today. So what do we do? You know, how do we lead spiritual lives when we feel like we barely have time to do the laundry, go to the grocery store? You know, how do I be a mystic when I have to go to work, right? How can I be a mystic when I have to go to work? So this is where I would offer you a consideration, that you take a pause. This is the month of pausing. Take a breath and just create one mystical moment. One moment where you absolutely feel connected to spirit. And in that moment, acknowledge that this is what's happening. Oh my gosh, I am connected to spirit right now. And that moment could be when you named so many of them in one song, but it could be when you're driving to work and you see that sun rising and you know, like, oh my gosh, I am on the planet for another day and I get to create it and make it whatever I want. It could be, you know, noticing a cardinal in a tree, or looking into your dog's eyes and seeing God, because dog is God in reverse. And it might be pausing when you hear church bells to just have a moment of intense gratitude. It might be kissing your sleeping child. Any moment can be a mystical moment if you pause and recognize its connection to spirit, that you're connected to spirit. So one day I was on retreat in southern Thailand. Now, that's not as exotic as it sounds, because Onyx and I used to live in Thailand. And we had just finished a group activity, and they sent us back to our cabanas to do a meditation, and a silent meditation. And I was alone in my cabana, and I believe I fell asleep. But it was kind of like that middle sleep. But I had a dream, which I'd like to share with you. Deep in meditation, I found myself on a beach. And there were two like Adirondack chairs and a fire. And I was waiting for someone to join me by this beachside fire. And then, like, far in the distance, I could see a figure coming towards me. And as it got closer, I recognized it as Jesus. Now, what I will tell you about my background is I grew up believing that Jesus was my friend. Jesus was my friend. I talked to Jesus all the time. And so, you know, and even in that day, like, Jesus is a spiritual guide to me. And so seeing Jesus come towards me wasn't all that unusual. Even though I hadn't really talked to Jesus in a while, though. He pointed that out, but we'll get to that in a second. So Jesus came up, and we embraced and settled into the chairs, and he told me, he'd miss seeing me around. But we had a nice chat, just catching up, and a lot of affirming, like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. You got it going on. You got this. Like you do when Jesus stops by. You just chat it up, but it was very affirming, like, you got this. I'm proud. There's no right way or wrong way to do it, but you're doing good. And near the end of our chat, I asked Jesus, is there anything I can do for you? And Jesus thought for a second, and he looked at me and he said, eat a peach. And then he was gone. You see, Jesus can't eat a peach. Spirit, God, source. He can't eat a peach. He needs me to eat a juicy, savory, sweet peach. Spirit needs me to express that. To this day, I absolutely savor juicy, warm, delicious peaches. And when I do, I remember that Spirit needs me to eat this peach. I have a body to experience this, to taste it, to smell it. That is my mystical moment where I know I am one with Spirit. I am emanating Spirit through me. I'm one. And the idea, if you can create a mystical moment and then string together enough mystical moments, you might just become a mystic. But that's my spiritual practice. That's how I lose myself in spirit. And so I would just invite you, as you walk through your day, to pause and find a moment to immerse yourself in the magic of this life, to just create one mystical moment where you're absolutely lost in the joy of spirit, overcome with awe, moved to tears by beauty. You could go to the Gulf. You have this beautiful Gulf here. Watch a sunset, have an ice cream, like swing on a swing at a park, but just melt into spirit. So that's my invitation for you to try. Just a few moments, each day. And like I said, if you string together enough of these moments, you'll be ready for game day. You will be ready when life's challenges shows up, because you'll be able to stand rock solid in your truth, just like Aunt Kate. And you'll weather life's challenges with grace, resting and knowing, who you are, the divine essence of who you are. I bless each and every one of you. And I know with the excitement of discovering your mystical moments on your spiritual journey as you become like spiritual Olympians of your own life. Look, and if you try it and it's not working, I would just ask you to just do one thing for me. Eat a peach. Just eat a peach. Okay. Namaste. Thank you so much.